Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Deep and Effective Big Book Study. I am your host, a recovered alcoholic. Hope everybody is doing well today. Thank you for dialing in. This is going to be episode 9, and in this episode, we're going to be starting chapter 2. There is a solution, and we will be breaking it up into 2 parts. And I believe a good stopping point for this chapter will be top of 23 because something very magical happens on the top of 23. But we'll get into that in a minute. So as always, before we get going with the chapter, we want to invite God in, and so we can start this thing off right. And if you're new to the channel, so you know we always open up with the set-aside prayer. There are many variations of this prayer. You can go online and find one that fits you the best. I just grabbed one offline here, and it seems to be just fine for me. So let's take a little moment of silence, and let's invite God into this. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, the 12 steps, and especially you, so I may have an open mind and a new experience of all these things. Please help me to see the truth. All right, now it's official. We got God in this. So, as always, guys, I'm going to drop in my email right here. It's recoveredalcoholic1939@gmail.com. If you got any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. Also, I'm going to offer my hand in sponsorship. For men, I can help you get hooked up with the spiritual experience. Ladies out there, I can get you in touch with some other women who are very strong in the program. All big book solution stuff here. Also, I'm going to drop in 2 meetings that I attend regularly. One is on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Central. It's an all-men's meeting, step study stuff. And here's the Zoom code and password. Another meeting that I attend is on Sundays. It's men and women's, and it meets also at 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Sundays Central. And here is the passcode in Zoom for that. So, all right, we got all the pleasantries out of the way. And as always, we're going to read from page 25. Because, the name of the channel is Deep and Effective Big Book Study. Well, this is where it comes from. So if you want to go with me to page 25, and in the middle of the page there, it starts with this paragraph right here. The great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that the Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to solve those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. And fantastic. And I've said this many times, and I'm going to say it many times again. Is right. I'm just not reading this paragraph off of page 25. It's actually my experience, right? That's one of the things that we need to understand is that in order to have a deep and effective spiritual experience, I need to understand what the problem is. And the problem is alcoholism. And I need to understand the very thing that's going to get me to this deep and effective spiritual experience. And those are the 12 steps. And again, not because I read it, because that's my experience. Okay. And if you haven't had an opportunity, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It would really help us out, help us get growing out there. Okay, my friends, so we're going to be starting on page 17, which is chapter 2. And one of the most important things to look at in this chapter, it gets so overlooked, it gets missed, is the simplicity and also how these things are just hiding in plain sight. But let's look at the name of the chapter. It says there is a solution. There is one. It's singular. That's the only thing Alcoholics Anonymous is selling, is this solution that is contained in this book. If you have another way, congratulations, my hat's off to you, more power to you, right? But we're not going to be talking about your way. We're not even going to talk about my way. We're going to talk about the book's way. So let's look at one of the first word in this chapter, guys. Actually, let me just read this. It says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. That's that most controversial word in the rooms, isn't it? Right? Again, I am not recovering. I am recovered, just like the book tells me I would be. Have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. So when we see the word we, they're not talking about me and you. They're talking about themselves. You see, the first 88 pages of this book was written almost entirely with the words of we, us, and ours. They don't start talking about you and I until page 89 in the chapter 7, working with others, when they change the wording to you. They're now pointing the finger at us. They're pointing the finger at me, they're pointing the finger at you, and they're pointing the finger at everybody else. The first 88 pages of the book, they're talking about their experience. So this idea that it's a we program, it's a fallacy. That's not what they're telling us, right? And we'll get into that here in a minute on page 19, when they really talk about it. So what they're doing in the first 88 pages is talking about themselves and their experiences. And they say, if you do what we do, you will now have what we have. And now you go out and carry this message. So, and in this chapter 2, and actually chapter 3, it's all about the first step. Actually, the first 51 pages of the book is dedicated to the first step. This is something that we need to understand. It has taken up more of the book than anything else because it's that important. And if you've heard me in any of my other episodes, I talk about having first step experiences, and they're absolute vital. They're necessary in order to be successful in the program, as I have to have that first step experience. And this is why we spend so much time and so much detail in the book explaining what this first step experience needs to look like, right? And we're going to talk about a lot of it in this chapter. So I'm just going to kind of read this whole first page here, guys, because there's so much pertinent information, right? And I'll pick back up on it. It says, where we are average Americans, all sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally would not mix, and boy, how true is that? But there exists among us a fellowship of friendliness and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. And I got to tell you, that's been my experience too. We are like the passengers of a great liner, the moment after rescue from shipwreck, where camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Does everybody know what steerage means? Because I can promise you I didn't. And I'm going to go to my handy dandy AA Big Book Dictionary because I use it all the time. I need it. It's such a valuable tool for learning. And I'm going to read what steerage is, and then I'm going to explain to you why we're talking about this. So steerage is helm, the section of a passenger ship originally near the rudder, providing the least expensive fares and rooms. So this sentence is one of the 3 Titanic references that Bill gives us, right? Because when he's talking about steerage to captain's table, and when you understand that steerage, so back in the great ocean liner days, the way that you bought a ticket on one of these, great ships to travel across the Atlantic or wherever, is that it went by your social standing and your financial situation. So the poorer you were, or the darker your skin was, the lower on the ship you went, right? And at the very poorest and whatever people consider to be the lowest class of people, it was as low as the ship as you could possibly get, literally down by the machinery and the ship's engines, and you were down there with the steam and all that. And but they're talking, and then there's the captain's table, and the more wealthy you were, probably the wider you were. I'm not saying this to offend anybody, I'm just telling you this is how it went, right? Is the higher up on the decks that you would be able to get to. So, but when they're talking about when the shit hit the fan, right? And things are going bad on the Titanic, it didn't matter rich, poor, black, white, left, right, up, down. It didn't matter. Everybody came together to start help save everybody's ass. And this is what we're about to talk about. He says, right, and I'll go back over it. Unlike the feeling of the ship's passenger, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. So after the dust settled, the Titanic, and then everybody, whoever survived and got rescued, people went on with their lives, right? The rich went back to being rich and the poor went back to being poor, and that was the end of it. But here's what happens. It says the feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us, right? See, the common problem is what brings us together, okay? And what is our common problem? It's alcoholism. And what we're about to read in the next 2 paragraphs is all about the first tradition, all about unity. And I've talked about it in another episode of when I break down the circle and the triangle. I go over this in great depth. Is this what we need to start understanding, that the common problem is alcoholism. So, but that in itself would have never held us together as we now join. Right? So just the problem is not enough, my friends. Right? We need something else, and here it is. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. Right? We have a way out which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. So one of the things that we see on the very first page of this chapter is about the unity, the common problem and the common solution, singleness of purpose and primary purpose. Right? This program is for the real alcoholic. Right? Now I know that might sound a little controversial or offensive, but that's the reality of it. You see, my responsibility to you, the viewer or the newcomer or anyone else, is that I'm supposed to be giving an adequate and accurate representation of the program. That's my responsibility. And so in doing that, I have to not only tell you what Alcoholics Anonymous is, I have to tell you exactly what Alcoholics Anonymous is not. That's what it means to be responsible. So I'm going to jump over to 18. And I'm gonna read quite a bit of this chapter verbatim, guys, because it's just so necessary. And that top of 18, it says, an illness of this sort, we have come to believe an illness, right? Again, this when we see the word we, they're not talking about us. They're talking about themselves, right? They're going to give us their description of what alcoholism is. We're not interested in what everybody else thinks alcoholism is, because there'd be no unity in that now, would there? But he says, an illness of the sort we have come to believe involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can, right? If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness. And tell me if you can relate to this. For with it there goes annihilation. Oh, that's a powerful word. Of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all those lives that touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase this. So what I just read is the benefits of alcoholism. This is what alcoholism, this is what it created in my life, right? It talks about it later in the book, that we are like a tornado roaring our way through people's lives, right? It talks about it in the night. And this is another example of how I affect everything around me. It talks about annihilation. That's exactly what I did, right? I annihilated all my relationships, all my job, everything that I am, right? I destroy. I'm going to drop down on the page, and this is one of my favorite paragraphs, right? This is some point blank stuff I'm about to read. There is no wiggle room. They meant what they said. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, very important word, right? This solution, the solution that's in this book. We're not interested in any other solution. Who can properly arm the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Right? This is where we get this just repeated over and over, that why one alcoholic working with another is so effective. Why one alcoholic working with another can accomplish things that cannot be accomplished in any other situation. This is what makes the program successful, is we need two willing alcoholics to enter into a relationship to be successful. And here it is. This is a promise right here. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. Well, what is the understanding that I need to reach? What is it that I need to come to? What is this belief system, right? I need to believe the understanding is that alcoholism is hopeless, right? And we're going to read it in this paragraph, is that alcoholism is going to kill me. Right? Bill talks about it in his story. He had but two alternatives, right? It's cage or coffin. That's the understanding that I need to come to be successful. And I'm going to read this last paragraph. The man who's making the approach has had the same difficulty. So this is what makes us so effective to another person. If you haven't had these experiences, then you can't be of usefulness to somebody else. Same difficulty. That he obviously knows what he's talking about. That his whole department shouts at the news prospect that he's a man with a real answer. Right? That's what I'm here to do. I'm supposed to bring you a real answer to your problem. That he has no attitude of holier than thou. Nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful. that there are no fees to pay, no actions to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we found most effective. And this is just beautiful stuff when they're talking about sponsorship, and in chapter 7 they go into greater detail about it, right? I'm not here to run your life. I'm not here to fix you. My responsibility to the newcomer is to give them an adequate and accurate representation of the program, right? It ain't personal. You don't work for me, right? And this is what they're talking about. They said, these are the conditions we found most favorable, right? This belief that I have to run every idea I have by my sponsor or call my sponsor every day and all this other crap that we hear. And that's not what it's about. I have but one role in someone's life: to help them get hooked up to a power greater than themselves. Anything outside the scope of that is none of my business. So top of 19, guys, the sentence with, we feel that the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. And I've talked about this in other episodes. So, right, sobriety is not my answer. Just not drinking is not the answer to alcoholism. Here's the answer to alcoholism. I'm about to read it. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respected homes, occupations, and affairs. So, right, again, I have to understand what these principles are before I can even begin to practice them in all my affairs, right? And it says, in our respected homes, occupation, and affairs. So it's written in that order for a very specific reason, because when we go to chapters 9, which is the family afterward, that's my home. So they're going to give me instructions on how to practice these principles within my home. Then the next place is my occupation. So we have chapter 10, which is to employers. So it gives me more instructions on how to take these principles into my professional life. And then it says our affairs. Well, it's chapter 11, a vision for you. So now they're telling me how to take this stuff out into the world with me, right? Nothing in this book is written by coincidence, or they just didn't put stuff in there because they thought it sounded good. Everything has its very specific purpose and place. I love this next sentence. All of us spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort which is going to be described, right? So it's a very, very important sentence to understand, because they're getting ready to describe some things, some very specific things, and it ain't got nothing to do with not drinking and going to a bunch of meetings. What they're getting ready to describe and what they talk about putting a lot of effort into is about inventory and about carrying the message. That's what we do. That is the program. It's about the day-to-day life of seeking and trying to do God's will, and then carrying the message to the newcomer. That is the effort that I have to apply myself to. It says, if we keep on the way we are going, there's little doubt that much good will result. But the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. So, right, just not drinking is not scratching, is just barely scratching the surface of the problem. You know, the book repeats this over and over and over and over, that the solution to alcoholism is not sobriety, right? Recovery is the solution. Sobriety becomes the inevitable byproduct of that. Jump down the page a little bit. It says, many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. Right? I enjoy recovery. I enjoy passing this message on to others. Right? It's not something to be dreaded. Right? Recovery is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And when I start to have that perspective of it, well, it changes everything. Right? I don't have to endure and tolerate. No, this is something that it becomes a working part of my life. And they ask us a question right here. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given us? Well, the answer is in the question. H-O-W. How? That's how I'm going to present to the newcomer. I'm going to teach them how to be honest, open-minded, and willing. Right? So freely given. Right? 12-step work is about for fun and for free. Next paragraph is huge. Again, the we is not me and you, it's them. We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring the task of our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest for a useful program for anyone concerned with the drinking problem. I want to break down this paragraph here real quick, guys. Right? We've all heard the term experience, strength, and hope. Right? But have you ever asked yourself exactly where it exists in the big book? Well, it doesn't. The first time we ever see it is in the foreword to the third edition, which came out in 1976. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with the term experience, strength, and hope. But that's not what they gave us. What they gave us, which was experience, knowledge, and wisdom. See, I don't come into a meeting and ever share my experience, strength, and hope. I'm not doing this channel because I'm here to share my experience, strength, and hope. I'm here to share my experience, my knowledge, and my wisdom. And let's look in the paragraph and let's see what we're talking about. So, right, it says, we shall bring to task our combined experience. That's obvious. Our knowledge. And then the useful program is the wisdom. And they're written in a very specific order for a very specific reason. It's because in order to have knowledge, I need to have experience. In order to have wisdom, I need to have experience. So the experience is what is absolutely necessary to be successful. So I'm not interested in sharing experience, strength, and hope. It's not really my role. My role to the newcomer is to share experience, knowledge, and wisdom. The first thing I got to have is experience, and then everything else will fall into place. So let's stop. Let's pick back up on top of page 20. I'm going to read just a beautiful sentence here at the top of the page. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend on constant thought of others and how we may help their needs. So it doesn't tell me that my very life as an ex-problem drinker depends upon how many meetings a week I go to. It didn't tell me how many times I was supposed to call my sponsor. It didn't tell me how many times I was supposed to read the daily reflection, how many times I was supposed to ask God to keep me sober. I could go on and on and on and on about everything that we have now allowed to replace what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is. Right? No, my very life depends upon God and service. That's it. Nothing outside the scope of that exists. So the next paragraph. You may already have asked yourself, why is it all of us become so very ill from drinking, right? Have you ever sat down and asked yourself that question? Why do I keep doing what I do? I don't understand, right? Doubtless you're curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you're an alcoholic and wants to get over it, you may be already asking yourself what I have to do. So there's 3 parts in this sentence I just read that we overlook completely. So one of the things we need to understand, if you're an alcoholic, we need to stop assuming that everyone that walks into the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, number 1, is a real alcoholic. Right? We need to stop assuming we know why everybody in that room is there. Right? So this is one of the things that I have to learn about myself. Do I believe I'm an alcoholic? That's the first question. If you are an alcoholic, that's a yes or no question. And that's what the first 51 pages of this book are here to help me determine. Right? There's another part. Do you even want to get over it? I'm an alcoholic at the age of 13. I have zero desire to get over it till I'm 41. Right? Because alcohol is still working for me. So that's 2 things we need to establish. Are you an alcoholic, or do you even want to be here? Do you even want to go through these steps? Right? Because I'm not going to waste my time with you if you don't. And then here's the third part. Then what do I have to do? Right? These are the requirements. This is what we're supposed to be presenting to the newcomer. Right? Oh, just keep coming back, brother. Welcome. You're in the right place. And that's complete crap. No, we're supposed to be taking these newcomers, men and women, and sitting them down and spending time getting to know them. That's what the responsibility statement is about, right? Why are you here? Are you an alcoholic? Do you even want to quit drinking? Are you ready to take these steps? If not, we're going to move on to the next person. I've talked about this in other episodes, and I'll always continue to talk about it. Look at the next sentence, guys. Start of the new paragraph. It's the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. What is outside the scope of that? That's what we're here to do, is help you get over alcoholism. If you don't have alcoholism, you don't need to be here. And it's my responsibility to help you determine if you have alcoholism. And then it says this, we, again, there's that we, not me and you, shall tell you what we have done. And listen to this. before going into detailed discussion, I hear people talk about how vague the program is, and they didn't address this, and they didn't address that, and I gotta tell you, bullshit. They addressed everything they needed to address to the T in great detail. The problem is that we don't have anybody left to teach the program to the newcomer. That's why it seems so vague and mysterious. So I've said this before, and I'll say it again, guys. The first 51 pages of the book are designed to help the reader determine to their own satisfaction, I'm quoting the book here, if they're the real alcoholic, right? Because there's a difference between somebody that actually has the disease of alcoholism and everything else. And I'm not making light of anybody's struggles or problems and hardships in life. And I'm not doing that. But we need to establish, because the book does, the program establishes that there's this thing called the real alcoholic. And we're going to get into great detail here with it. And we're going to start on 20 with this. And we're going to talk about some different types of drinkers. And we're going to start with the moderate drinker. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome, and even need medical attention. So let's look at something, right? Moderate drinker, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? They're the guys, gals that just have no problem whatsoever, right? But let's look at this hard drinker. Look at some of the words that they use to describe, right? It says he may have the habit badly enough. You see, because what they're telling us in this sentence is that there's a difference between a habit and a disease, right? See, I've had other habits in my life that cause me an immense amount of anguish, right? These other outside issues that we don't talk about in the meetings, and we're not supposed to. But here's the reality of it. Those were simply habits for me because I was able to do what it talks about on the top of 21. I have found a sufficient enough reason to leave those habits behind. But I wasn't able to do that with alcoholism. You see, because I just cannot walk away from a disease, right? And I might be able to walk away from these habits, and it's exactly what it talks about. It might be, I've had trouble. It took me a long time. It didn't come easily for me, but I was still able to muster the willpower to do it. But I can't do that with alcoholism. 21, it says, but what about the real alcohol? You know how many times we hear the word true alcoholic and real alcoholic in the book? It's a bunch, right? It wasn't by accident that they wrote it over and over and over. They wanted to separate it. It's that important. See, because the real alcoholic, the individual like me that actually has the disease of alcoholism, there is no other way out other than a spiritual experience, right? These other types of drinkers and other terms that exist out there, there are other ways for you, and that's great, but there ain't no other way for us. Listen to what he says, but what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a constant hard drinker, but at some stage in his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. And the reason that is because of the physical allergy. Tell me if you can relate to any of this. Here's the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I can remember reading this for the first time years ago, and I said, oh my God, how do they know that about me? I was literally, felt like I was reading my own autobiography, right? He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He's always more or less insanely drunk. That was me, right? I thought it was normal just to drink to oblivion, right? I didn't understand that when I started to put alcohol in my body that I didn't really have much of a choice, right, of how many I was going to have. It says he may be one of the finest fellows in the world. Well, they're smashing the stereotype of an alcoholic right there, isn't it? Yet let him drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. Oh my God, I would lock myself in my house by myself. all by myself and just with my bottle. That's all I wanted to do. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. Well, how about going to work? That's pretty important engagement. How about being there for your family? That's a pretty important engagement. Again, I could list 1,000 things of engagements that I couldn't keep because once I start to drink, all bets are off. And then it goes into all these examples, right? Of what's some of the characteristics, what are the things in my life that, that can make me an alcoholic. And then it tells us, right, on page 22, but that's no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, right, the real alcoholic. As our behavior patterns vary, but the description would identify him roughly. So in the middle of the page on 22, with this paragraph, why does he behave like this? There's that question mark. Well, what we're about to do is we're about to get into this segue that's leading us up to the top of page 23. And I've talked about this in other videos, and if you don't know about this, we have to understand that the first step is broken down into two parts. Therefore, it requires a two-part explanation, right? When you go in your book on page 59 and you read the first step in its entirety, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, and there's that little dash, that's that hyphen. And then it says that our lives become unmanageable. See, that dash is what's going to separate the first step into two parts. And like I said, it needs a two-part explanation. Well, that's what the top of 23, this is this part of the book where we separate the step, right? Because all the way up to page 23, we've dealt almost exclusively with the physical allergy. Now, there is the mental obsession that is sprinkled in, but for the majority of the reading, we've been talking about the powerlessness, the manifestation of the allergy, the phenomenon of craving, right? The second part of the first step is about the unmanageability of the mind, the insanity, my inability to manage the decision to not drink. So now that we've established that, let's look what we're about to read and work our way up to the top of 23. It says, why does he behave like this? That's a question mark, right? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink, right? That's singular, because that's the phenomenon of craving. That one drink's all I need. Means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation. Why does he take that one drink? Because what we're doing, we're about to leave the physical allergy and go almost exclusively into the mental obsession, because this is where the main problem is. And I'm going to read it verbatim when we get there. Right? It says, why can't he stay on the water wagon? These are all question marks. We need to be able to successfully answer these questions for ourselves. And as a host, as the sponsor, I need to be able to answer these questions successfully for the newcomer and to tell them why you can't stay on the water wagon, why you can't stay away from that one drink. That's my responsibility. What has become of his common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? So here's the thing about willpower. We hear it all the time in the meetings, right? The fact is that alcoholics in general are the most strong-willed people on the planet, right? We don't lack willpower at all. We're just powerless over alcoholism. Huge difference. I'll keep reading. Now I'm going to go verbatim, guys. Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people, right? We are not sure why, once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. See, alcoholism is hopeless. It says we cannot answer the riddle, and neither can I. I cannot tell you why I'm an alcoholic, where it comes from, how. I can't. I'm not even going to try. I just know that it is. Listen to this, guys. We know that why the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years. So again, that's shattering the stereotype that I'm not an alcoholic because I don't drink every day. That's nonsense. Has nothing to do with how often I drink. Okay? He reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens both in the bodily and mental sense, what makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. So this is what we're talking about. When I take alcohol in, physical allergy is activated, and I'm off to the races. But listen to this, guys. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle. The terrible cycle that they're referring to is the phenomenon of craving. It's a terrible thing for me, right? Because it goes back to this, like, okay, I understand, right? Okay, if I have an allergy to something and I put it in my body, and I have a reaction to it. Okay, well, I get that. And I get that you're saying that I have an allergy to alcohol, and when I put it, what it does, the reaction is that I want more and more and more and more. I get that. But that's not the problem, is it? Because I would just simply say, well, I just won't put it in my body because I know how sick it makes me. So any sane, logical, sound human being, that's what their solution would be, was to simply not put it in their body. But I can't do that. And this is what this paragraph is about to tell me. Listen to this. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centered in his mind rather than his body. If you ask him why he started on the last bender, the chances are he will offer you one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. So I want to stop here. We've run over time. I'm looking right here. And even after editing this, hopefully it won't be too long. But I want to stop here on the top of 23 and leave everybody with this understanding that when we pick back up in episode 10, we're going to be coming from this paragraph on 23 about, therefore, the main problem the alcoholic centers his mind. Because from page 23 on is where we're going to get almost exclusively about the mental obsession, the unmanageability, the insanity of alcoholism. And what we're going to end up doing is shattering, allowing the book to be our voice, this belief of what unmanageability is truly about, right? I'm just going to tell you now that the unmanageability in the second part of the first step is simply nothing more is that I am without the ability to manage the decision to not drink. It has nothing to do with my external conditions. It has nothing to do with what's going on outside in my life, right? I'm losing jobs. I'm losing relationships. I'm having all of these consequences. I'm going to jail. I've got legal problems. That's not what the unmanageability is about. And the second part of this step from here on, and then in chapter 3, more about alcoholism, we are going to just crush the belief system of what we hear in the rooms today. So guys, appreciate you staying to the end and hanging there with me. If you haven't already had an opportunity to please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, it will really help us grow and we can get the word out. Again, drop into my email, recoveredalcoholic1939@gmail.com. By all means, questions, comments, concerns, reach out to me. Looking for sponsorship, please reach out to me. And we'll end it with this on the bottom of page 164 with the sentence, may God bless and keep you until then. So, take care and much love.